Baby, be in love with your fantasies. I can be a star, make the sky so bright. Welcome to my dungeon, this is ecstasy. Let me play the fantasy.
What's good, YouTube? It's your girl, Asia.
And it's your boy, BJ. And we back like we never left. Y'all, we back in the building, ready to rock. Hey, we got a good one, too. We actually got a really good video, and I've been waiting on this one for a hot minute.
Yeah, and we got some special guests in the building with us today.
As y'all can see.
Yeah, so... this is my son, and...
I'm Ariel. Hi.
Say hello. Y'all, they a little bit nervous. Y'all, don't they look all cute and everything, all nervous and stuff? But yeah, so we, what are we doing, babe?
We're about to be jumping into Thomas Sowell.
Yeah.
Now, we're actually pulling this one up again because we actually wanted to get Zacchaeus and Ariel's kind of like get their take on this one, because this is like facts about slavery that were never mentioned in high school. And Zacchaeus and Ariel, they just graduated a year ago. So we want to kind of like get their take on, you know, some of this information, if they ever heard of it, or if they how much they know of in regards to like facts about slavery, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
You know?
So this will be good. This should be interesting. I'm just curious to know what y'all gonna say about this once y'all actually like get a chance to like hear it and listen to what he got to say. But yeah, there's nothing else to it, but let's jump right into it.
Nothing else to it but to do it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
So here we go.
Go ahead and check it out and see.
Yeah. Untold facts about slavery. I didn't know it was all this in the beginning.
The instrumental use of the history of slavery today also underlies the claim that slavery grew out of racism. For most of its long history, which includes most of the history of the human race, slavery was largely not the enslavement of racially different people, for the simple reason that only in recent centuries has either the technology or the wealth existed to go to another continent to get slaves and transport them en masse across an ocean. People were enslaved because they were vulnerable, not because of how they looked. The peoples of the Balkans were enslaved by fellow Europeans, as well as by the peoples of the Middle East, for at least 6 centuries before the first African was brought to the Western Hemisphere. Before the modern era, by and large, Europeans enslaved other Europeans, Asians enslaved other Asians, Africans enslaved other Africans, and the indigenous peoples of the Western Hemisphere enslaved other indigenous peoples of the Western Hemisphere. Slavery was not based on race, much less on theories about race. Only relatively late...
That's crazy. Every time I hear that, I just like... You know what, though? And what he just said was like slavery grew out of racism.
He said it did not.
It did not. It did not grow out of racism.
Yeah, he said it didn't grow out of racism. And not just that, but like, did y'all kind of already know in regards to like other nations already kind of like enslaving their own people?
No, I didn't know that at all.
So I didn't really know that other races enslaved their own people, but what I did know is that I did know that black people have always enslaved their own people going back to the pyramids. But I feel like if we were taught this in school, that every race has enslaved their own kind at some point throughout human history, I do feel like people would look at racism a little differently today. Because people wouldn't be walking around saying that only white people enslaved black people and no one else did.
Does it surprise you, though, that black people, like all races, like enslaved their own race?
No, I don't. Because I think that throughout history, there's always been a hierarchy of statuses. You got the kings and you got the peasants. So I feel like the higher up people would enslave the lower.
The vulnerable.
The vulnerable, like you said,
when you put it like that, it makes more sense.
Yeah. Interesting. Look at him. Okay.
Hey, I love it.
Not based on race, much less on theories about race. Only relatively late in history did enslavement across racial lines occur on such a scale as to promote an ideology of racism that outlasted the institution of slavery itself. Wherever a separate people were enslaved, they were disdained or despised, whether they were different by country, religion, caste, race, or tribe. In East Africa, The Maasai were feared slave raiders, and other African tribes, either alone or in conjunction with Arabs, enslaved their more vulnerable neighbors. As late as 1891, it was reported that Manyuema slavers had demoralized surrounding tribes, destroying crops, and famine reigned everywhere. Even in the early 20th century, Abyssinians were still raiding other Africans and carrying off slaves. It was 1922 before the British had gained sufficient control in Tanganyika to stamp out slavery there. Arabs were the leading slave raiders in East Africa, ranging over an area larger than all of Europe. The total number of slaves exported from East Africa during the 19th century has been estimated to be at least 2 million. The form in which the
2 million.
Wow.
That's a lot of people.
Yeah.
That's a lot of people.
So when he said that the British that came in, does that mean like they were actually like in essence like white people were trying to stop slavery in other countries in Africa? Because he said they were trying to stomp out the slavery, like from British, from, you know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Like
I don't know this for a fact, but I do know, like, just looking at American history, how, like, Manifest Destiny, how they were going across the country trying to spread a religion. I feel like they kind of went to Africa with the same intent, but they saw that slavery was going on, and they probably were, like, trying to stop it because of their beliefs on the, I don't know, the Christian, I think they were Catholic, maybe?
Yeah, either Christianity or Catholic. It would be either or. But I do like where you said that that it's important to know that, you know, slavery isn't about like racism per se. Like going back to the history of it, it had a lot to do with like people just being vulnerable. And easy to be taken over, because obviously you can't be racist towards somebody that looks just like you. You know what I mean? If anything, it has to do with more like classism, if anything.
right.
I feel like racism is like something you're taught. Like, you're not born with a racist.
I agree.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
1000% agree.
Honestly, I feel like you could just feel bad for like some of these races because like they weren't born with it. They were taught by their family.
I would agree. Yeah.
And it's like that's all you can do.
I would agree.
And that's why it continues to perpetuate over like generations because of what you've been taught.
Yeah.
You know, from
Like
your grandparents.
I've seen
or,
so many videos of kids and they like look at other colors and say they're beautiful, but like other people, they're like not born with it. They're taught, and they'll just talk crap about people. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
it has a lot to do with what you're taught.
Yeah.
Yes.
What you're taught. Yeah. I would agree.
And at the end of the day, you got to be taught the truth.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
The total number of slaves exported from East Africa during the 19th century has been estimated to be at least 2 million. The form in which the story of slavery has reached most people today has been along the lines of the best-selling book and widely watched television miniseries Roots by Alex Haley. Challenged on the historical accuracy of Roots, Haley said, "I tried to give my people a myth to live by. This instrumental use of history, or purported history, is open to the same objections as other instrumental myth-making." Despite the impression created by Roots, during the era of the massive slave trade from West Africa, a white man was more likely to catch malaria in Africa than to catch slaves himself. The average life expectancy of a white man in the interior of sub-Saharan Africa at that time was less than 1 year. By and large, men from Europe or the Western Hemisphere came to the coasts of Africa, bought their slaves, and left as soon as possible. Even so, the death rates among the white crews of the ships carrying slaves to the Western Hemisphere were as high as the death rates among the slaves themselves. It was only much later, after quinine and other medical measures enabled Europeans to survive where there were tropical diseases, was it possible for them to invade Africa in force and establish empires there. But by then, the Atlantic slave trade had already been ended. During the era of that trade, Africa was largely ruled by Africans, who established the conditions under which slave sales took place. The crew of a slave ship was in no position to defy African rulers and their armies by going out across the land and capturing people willy-nilly. The stronger African peoples captured and enslaved the weaker peoples. The same pattern found over the centuries in Europe, Asia, the Western Hemisphere, and Polynesia. In Nyasaland, the Ngoni and Yall swaggered over and terrorized other tribes. In Uganda, the Baganda made life miserable for their neighbors. and the Nyoro and Hima of Ankole enslaved Toro women and children. The Tutsi dominated the Hutu in Rwanda, the Maasai lorded it over the Kikuyu and Kamba, and the latter, in turn, held the Indorobo in a kind of serfdom. It was precisely the fact that Europeans, except for the Portuguese, seldom participated in the raids that captured and enslaved Africans that enabled most people in Europe and the Americas to remain oblivious to the traumatic experience that this was, with some Africans committing suicide to avoid capture and wives being whipped as they tried to cling to their husbands or children. Historian David Breon Davis pointed out that Europeans had little contact with the actual process of enslavement, and that as late as 1721, the Royal African Company asked its agents to investigate the modes of enslavement in the interior. Europeans typically saw only the end results, enslaved people being offered for sale on the coast. It was much the same story in the
Oh, so they didn't even know what was going on.
Like,
a lot of people didn't even know how bad it really was.
Right. Like, and I want to ask y'all this question too. Like, even like with like slavery, like when y'all learned about like slavery in America, like did y'all learn that like that people went to Africa to like take them and then brought them here, or like what was the? Did y'all know about like slave trade? Like people were like trading and slave trading, or did you just think that Americans just went to Africa and just got slaves and went into the forest, picked them up, kidnapped them?
I was given the understanding that the Europeans just went to Africa, snatched a couple of them, and left. I didn't know that the kings and the royalty of Africa were orchestrating a lot of this.
Yeah, I didn't know that either.
That I didn't know, but I do question now that I've been watching this video for the last 5 minutes. Why is it that it's only white people that get the hate for slavery? It's like just not this slavery, but all slavery.
Just slavery all the way around.
Yeah, nobody talks about any other races. Them enslaving themselves, black people enslaving other black people. Like nobody
I think
talks
it's because
about
of the lack of knowledge.
Like
because even when we started watching this, like when we watched this for the very first time, like one of the things that I thought was really interesting to me was that it was every race. Like every race was enslaving every race, and that was something that was really quite intriguing to me because I always thought it to be that way. I don't recall them teaching us in school about like every race enslaving every race. I never recalled that even being a thing. I know we talked about slavery, but I don't recall ever us like talking about each race like and capturing their own race and taking advantage of like the weak and the vulnerable peoples. And then on top of that, like the other thing that he kind of just brought to the forefront was like nobody knew, even though there was like the whole slave trading thing going on and taking place and slaves were kind of being shipped everywhere. No one knew how bad it really was. Like they were just snatching these people from their families and their wives and their kids and just being like, oh well, you know what I mean? Shipping them off, and then you never see them again.
Yeah, and like you said, you know, because like the slave trade went from like Africa to the United States, and then it went to like Haiti, then it went to like South America.
That's what the Atlantic slave trade was. It went to Haiti, Jamaica,
South America. So I really feel like what's been perpetuated in the United States or America is just like the history perpetuating like slavery. I just feel like that's just been like the fabric of America in regards to just like slavery and how it started. Like white people took blacks and then they started America that way. But I feel like that's kind of far from the truth. It like it's part of that, but that's not the entire truth.
That's not all of it.
You know what I mean?
That's a big chunk.
Let me say this. I feel like white people have gotten the worst of the hate of slavery because I feel like they recorded history a lot better than the rest of the world. Because I feel like, why is it that everybody knows so much about Europeans, kings and queens way back then, but when it comes to the pyramids, nobody has a clue, you know? And I feel like when it comes to just African countries in general, I feel like everybody has to do all this digging and sleuthing just to find a simple answer.
That's a good question.
Whereas you go to Europe and you know everybody's mom, dad, and great grandma that were kings and queens way back then know how they died, who their kids were, you know, all that stuff.
Yeah.
But when it comes to stuff this and slavery, Just like I didn't know that it was pretty much a whole business in selling slaves. I mean, I knew that they went and bought slaves, but I thought that they kind of just went and took them in a sense.
Oh, and it was a lucrative type of business trade too. Like people were making a lot of money off of that. I bet, like per person.
Hey, early human trafficking.
Like,
there you go.
Hold on, just one thing.
Sure.
Even like when it comes to just historical figures, you got like Hitler. People think that Hitler is the only person that has killed mass murdered people. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like you got Genghis Khan that conquered all of China and all of them.
We talked about Genghis Khan.
Yeah, we did.
And you got all even in World War II, the Imperial Japan tried to conquer half of China and the Pacific Islands. So no one talks about that, but
as far as like just like the mass massacres.
Yeah, like nobody talks about just human history in general, but it's only specific things in human history that people pay attention to.
I feel like Black history is gonna get better, like as we grow. You know what I mean? Like I feel like kids now, Black history is gonna be better because when we were younger, we didn't really learn anything about Black history, but now we have like Black Lives Matter movement, and that's gonna be like history books. You know what I mean? So I feel like our kids are going to learn more about Black history.
Yeah, and that's my hope is that more generations can just learn more about their history, especially like the Black culture.
Well, and that ties into like that whole critical race theory that we've kind of started like tapping into like and learning. Because remember, that's a whole big thing, like teaching critical race theory in high school and to children and that type
getting
of thing.
Them up to speed so they can kind of already be knowing these types of things, especially when you kind of have to deal with different types of people as you grow into an adult.
The races, the multitude of different races that you know what I mean, and understanding it to this, to the full extent, if you will.
Especially when it comes to like society.
They should teach kids that like if you are Black, like you are going to experience racism.
Yeah,
and how to be prepared for it.
But every race,
you know what I mean?
Every race,
right?
You know what I mean?
But see, to counter your argument is if you trying to teach a Black kid that racism is going to happen. Imagine if when your grandparents were in school, imagine if way back then they were taught that every race has had slavery, white people enslaved white people, Black people enslaved Black people. Yeah. Then there wouldn't be so much tension between Black and white, thinking that Black people walking around thinking that the white person right across from you has something to do with slavery, when in reality we all have experienced, not me, but our ancestors have all experienced racism in some way, shape, or form. Whether that be directly your somebody's great grandmother be a slave herself, or the white person across from you, his grandfather be the master
slave owner or whatever.
Right, but that's already been done. You know what I mean? So like our kids are still going to experience it. Yeah. Like police being pulled over by the police. I mean, we still have to teach our kids that. Like if everything's already been done, we can't. Racism is already a thing, and it's getting worse. It's going to keep getting worse.
Yeah.
Enslaved people being offered for sale on the coast. It was much the same story in the Ottoman Empire, where those who bought slaves had no idea what these slaves had been through before. The unique position of the Western world in the history, and especially the destruction of slavery, need not imply that there was unanimity within the West on this institution. In addition to whites who defended the enslavement of Africans on racial grounds, or who opposed general emancipation on social grounds, there were many whites, and even blacks, who defended slavery as a matter of self-interest as slave owners. Although most black owners of slaves in the United States were only nominal owners of members of their own families, there were thousands of other blacks in the antebellum South who were commercial slave owners, just like their white counterparts. An estimated 1/3 of the free persons of color in New Orleans were slave owners, and thousands of these slave owners volunteered to fight for the Confederacy during the Civil War. Black slave owners were even more common in the Caribbean. In short, there were...
Just like the Caribbean, Haiti, Jamaica, you know, like the islands and stuff like that.
So what's crazy is what he's saying, there were more black slave owners of slaves than there were...
Other white counterparts.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow.
I'm sure we both were taught this in school, was that, well, he's saying that the black slave owners or black people would volunteer for the Confederacy, but what I was taught in school, that that was how the black slaves would buy their freedom, in a sense, was to fight for the Confederacy. I did not know that they volunteered, nor did I know that they were black slave owners. I heard of them being slave owners, but I thought that was just completely rare. Like, it was just, you were just a black slave that just kind of just got lucky or found a way to make money being a free slave, and then come back and to be a slave owner to try and make your way. But I did not know that there was plenty of black slave owners, nor did I know that there are people volunteered for the Confederacy.
Volunteered, yeah.
Black slave owners were even more common in the Caribbean. In short, there were many defenders of slavery in the West, even in the 19th century. And outside the West, slavery was too widely accepted to require defense. No other nation ended slavery in the same way as the United States did, and few ended it after so short a struggle, as history is measured. How and why did slavery end in most of the world? There were two major processes. Over the centuries, as more and more territories around the world consolidated into nation-states with their own armies and navies, raiding those territories to capture and enslave the people who lived within them became more hazardous in itself, and also risked military retaliation against the countries from which the raiders came. Thus, more and more peoples became off-limits to slave raiders over time. Put differently, the areas which remained subject to slave raiding over the centuries were primarily those where the people lived in smaller or weaker societies. Such societies continued to exist where it was difficult, for geographic or other reasons, to consolidate large areas under one government. This was true of the Balkans, the backwaters of Asia, and much of sub-Saharan Africa. By the early modern era, sub-Saharan Africa, with its numerous and severe geographic handicaps, was one of the last remaining areas from which vast numbers of people could be enslaved.
Wow.
So again, these are just excerpts from Thomas Sowell's book, and again, Zacchaeus and Era, I like everything that y'all said, like in regards to just like y'all take on like slavery, like just what y'all know, especially like in regards to like slave trade, just like worldwide, you know.
So what's crazy to me, like, you know, and I'm just gonna go back on what Ariel was saying, you know, from the beginning, was that, you know, they kind of talked about like in high school more of like the major, political black figures, if you will, like, you know, that everyone has been, the Rosa Parks, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, like the main, you know,
that's honestly
people that really, like
main three people.
spearhead for the most part.
Yeah, that people would recognize in terms of like when you start talking about black history and slavery, it's like we kind of recycle the same people, the same information, if you will. We learn a little bit different. We learn it, you know, in ways, you know, throughout high school to get through the class. But it's just like, it's just interesting to me that for them to only teach that, you know, versus like this kind of stuff. And I brought that up too. I was like, I don't remember us talking about any of this, especially when it came to slaves.
Right. But see, the thing about it is that and again, like I said, these are excerpts from Thomas Sowell. He's done like a lot of extensive research to like really get down to like slavery and how slavery kind of affected the worldwide. But I feel like if a lot of people or a lot of children, especially here in America, just worldwide, like learn history in the way that this history has been kind of given to us. You know, as far as like the information, I feel like it will leave less room for people or for people's children to grow up being racist. If you actually were able to understand this information for what it is, because like I said, just understanding, because it's not, you know, slavery wasn't necessarily about racism. It wasn't about racism. It really was about like an economical thing. And you know, the people that were slaves, they weren't slaves because of the color of their skin and how they looked. It was more along the lines of
because they were poor and they were vulnerable.
Because of class, you know.
Yeah, almost like it's almost like there were more of like the class, like the battle of classism than it was racism. You know what I mean? Like, so to speak, especially like when you just listen to like videos like this, it's like, wow, like really, it's almost like if you were nobody, you were gonna be one of them. You know what I mean? Or you had to fight for it.
But again, they didn't teach y'all like any. You didn't like I know you kind of understood some of the information, or some of it kind of like rekindled your memory, but like none of it.
I feel like I know more about Anne Frank than I do slavery.
But see,
like I know more about her life.
But see,
that's Black history.
Yeah, that's what I was saying too. Is that like in school, like they'll talk about Martin Luther King, Rosa Parks, and Malcolm X, and then when it comes over to slavery, they just brush over it, and then on to the next black thing that happened in history. But like my thing about what they teach in school is that they kind of, I wouldn't say they sugarcoat it, but they
No, they do.
Well, yeah, they do. They do in a sense, but they don't tell the whole truth. They tell partial part of the truth. So like you probably should just do your own research. Honestly, that would help a lot.
But it's like you go to school to learn, so school should be teaching you.
Yeah, they should.
Like those things, right?
Yeah. And just like kids, just like you said as a kid, I think that's like the most important part is like they're teaching you, but you know you have to really do your own research. You got to really go search for the truth yourself. You know.
But you know what's crazy about that when you think about like all the things, the stories that go behind like those big figures in terms of like Black history is that like it almost like paints a picture of this whole racism aspect of like race and all the problems that Black people had with white people and white people had with Black people. But then it's just like, you know, this is the part where I feel like the baseline, the foundation of things that they need to really talk about and discuss, because it's an understand that everybody should understand. I just feel like like Cass was saying, like if you have if everybody's on an even playing field to know that at one point in time that it wasn't just Black people that were enslaved, like I feel like a lot of people may not know that.
Yeah. A lot of people don't, and I feel like that would. And
it's a misinterpretation. And just, you know what I mean? Your own self, you'd be like, shoot, well, I don't know if I even, just people grow up to think that, white people are this way or Black people are this way. And it's just like, shoot, at one point in time, we all were, enslaved and had this whole type of situation going on. It's a matter of how you got yourself out of it. Yeah.
But my thing is though, is that why is all hatred between Black and white towards each other? It always ends up back at the conversation of slavery.
Yeah.
Like
you wonder why.
Yeah, right. And you kind of wonder why. Now that after watching this video, you kind of wonder why it's just goes back to slavery, when in reality it wasn't even about race. It had nothing to do with race. It's just the fact that, like, the business. I'm up here, you're down here, and that's just what it is.
It's just what it is. Yeah. And that's why I'm glad that y'all had a chance to watch this video, and we had a chance to kind of like sit back and listen to what y'all had to say. So and I think the key part of this is just like we kind of came to the conclusion is like, in regards to like slavery, everybody would like see slavery different, and you would see racism differently. You definitely would see racism differently in America if you understood like the origin of slavery and how it really started. Because a lot of people have the apprehension about slavery, feeling that it was only done to us, and we were the only people that's been oppressed throughout history. When there's been a bevy of like nations of of people. At the bottom of the totem pole, they had to like go through slavery. So,
but even slavery aside, they were saying that they would come and take the struggling or not as functioning societies, and they would take those would be the ones they would take for slavery. But that's just how it is with anything. Like if you're an invading nation, you would obviously want to go invade another nation that you would think is less than you. You know what I'm saying?
That happens.
Yeah,
that happens.
Yeah. It's even happening right now.
You like things in the world today. There's countries that are invading other countries because they feel that they are less than them. But you wouldn't have that same country try and come and invade the United States because it wouldn't end up well. So that's why I feel like they invaded Africa.
Yeah.
But see, I just like the information that you guys just talked about, like what y'all knew about like slavery, because it kind of like intrigued me too. Like I was like, I didn't know that y'all kind of knew about slavery like this. You know? What I mean?
Yeah. And y'all, fresh out of high school, okay, we get it right from the horse's mouth.
and that's super important to do, especially for our young people, our younger generation, just to see exactly what they've been taught, or just so you can understand like what someone's projection is in life as far as like how they think or
Yeah.
what the ideology would be.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Like,
So,
I swear I know more about the Holocaust than actual slavery. Like, both are traumatic events, right?
yeah.
But, and I even heard that there were actual black people in the Holocaust also, which we didn't even know. I found that out on a movie.
Oh yeah, they're absolutely
And, like, I didn't get taught that.
There were all races.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I didn't know that at all until I watched the movie and it said at the end.
But see, that's just what I'm saying. They'll sugarcoat it or
Right.
kind of like the truth. It's not the whole truth. That people have the misconception that it was only Jewish people in the Holocaust.
So you think that's like a part of the problem of like our history is what we're actually and how we're actually being taught the information?
Yeah.
That's what I was saying.
That's where it
about,
starts.
that's what I was saying
That's
about
where it
recorded
starts.
history, and I feel
Ooh.
like the media, like not today's media, but I'm saying media in general makes it to where like every slave movie you've ever watched, they've always made it to where it seems like the slave master just hates the black person because they are black, and like it doesn't talk about what we just watched here about it being a business over in Africa.
Yeah.
They got the slaves from another African man or a king
or
or
queen.
Do you think it was like that at first, and then it got to the point where it was based off of color?
I mean, I definitely think there was some genuine hate.
I just feel like America, like the American fabric, like it's been wrapped around racism and black, white.
Yeah.
Per se here. I'm not saying worldwide, but just here in our history in America, that's what we've been taught, from the beginning,
Yeah.
So like I said, if you're able to like deprogram and reprogram what you've been taught, then your outlook will be completely different. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I'm glad that y'all had a chance to watch this and hopefully affect somebody else. You know what I mean, in a positive way.
Yeah, so y'all let us know what y'all think about this down in the comment section. Y'all have heard from Zacchaeus and Ariel. Thank y'all so much for joining us on this video. And if y'all enjoyed this, be sure you give us a big thumbs up, like, comment, and subscribe. Smash the notification bell. Join the family, y'all. And if ain't nobody else told you, I love you. And we're going to see y'all in the next video, y'all.
Absolutely. Better believe that.
Bye.
Already.